Hi, I'm Matt, and I'm going to teach you how to make a stencil today. A really easy stencil that you can put on a skateboard, a piece of paper, that you could also put on a t-shirt, or that if your mom's really nice, she might let you spray on your wall. Now, stencils, everybody's heard of before. They might be vinyl. This is vinyl, this plastic stuff that you often see stencils made out of. These are about $5 if you buy an alphabet stencil at Michael's or another store. These are really good for making bigger stencils because you can spell out your letters, cut them out carefully with a hobby knife. Today we're going to use scissors. You won't use gigantic scissors like me. You'll probably use smaller, regular craft scissors like this so you don't cut your finger off. File folders are important when you're starting out. You want to hunt for a material that's not only thick to make your stencil out of, but that's also easy enough to cut with scissors and a hobby knife. Hobby knives are also called X-Acto knives if you haven't heard of them before. This file folder is a stencil that I started on with scissors and that I will finish very quickly for you guys as a demonstration, and we'll take it outside and we'll test it with a little bit of spray paint. Then you'll go home and make your own. Starting out with your stencil as one piece can be kind of tricky at first. One of the students in my class just asked me, how and why are you keeping your stencil in one piece so that it doesn't fall apart? Most of us keep our stencil in one piece so that we can travel with it to go from home to school or vice versa, and it's really easy to put into our backpack without ripping like this. And we also keep it as one piece because when you're stenciling, it's easier to lay down the stencil on top of something like this and spray paint pointed down than it is to hold it up on the wall. Now, if I were to make one that was one piece, I could still hold it up on the wall, but I would need to attach it with some sticky spray first. They make a sticky spray you can put on the back and then attach it to the wall and peel it off later after you've spray painted. For our purposes, we're going to be laying our stencil on the floor, so you'll get a chance when you're sitting at a table to have your stencil in front of you and cut from the side and use both hands. Does that make sense? I started my stencil by cutting from the sides. First cutting out a chin and a top cut where the head was and a side cut where the chin was. I then moved on to the nose, to the mouth, to the outlines of the eyes, outlines of the ears, and the outlines of the hair. I'm going to lay my stencil down on this table so you guys can gather around and watch how mine. I'm always very careful not to cut off a section like this that I want to be part of my design. I'm even careful with parts like the nose not to remove them, parts like the lips not to remove them, and it takes a little practice to start cutting in an outline way. I've outlined my shape. Now I'm going to go into the eyeball and make an even smaller circle. One side of the thorn, two sides of the thorn. Notice the table is holding all the weight, so I don't have to worry about confusing myself. One side of the thorn, two sides of the thorn. Cut. To the left eye, we do the same thing, but I'm going to switch it up a little bit. I'm going to cut from the bottom thorn, left side and right side, remove the thorn, and I'm going to come up here to the top and cut the other shape of the eye, the inner eye that is, in another thorn. If you don't confuse yourself and think about everything as a thorn that you have to take out, you can go back to old lines like I have here and add the shape of things like hair or eyelashes very quickly and easily. The thorn shape is the same in and outside of the line, and just remove the little thorns when you're done. When you're beginning these stencils, it's a habit sometimes of kids to stop cutting and not go back and add these thorn shapes. But a really good design shows shadow and texture by adding thorns where the light would naturally cast a shadow. To continue things like hair, I do the same thing. I cut in on my thorn, outside, inside, being really careful not to tear off the whole piece because I want it to remain as and my thorn that goes here. I might confuse people if I cut out this part of the thorn, but I did need this line to get inside of the ear and make some definition. Everybody knows what I mean by definition. It means that you'll be able to see the outside of a line and the inside of a line. Cut. To this stage of their design, but they don't finish it correctly. It's very important when you're making stencils to treat the background as if it's going to need some shading. I like to use a really popular one, which is like sunbursts. You just cut from side to side and you go all the way across your background. And the only reason that you do this is because the positive and the negative space is really hard to see with a stencil unless you go back and create some with lines. And these are awfully thick lines, and that makes it really quick for me when I'm cutting it out. Now if you have a hobby knife, you can come back afterwards and cut the last piece of the line off so you can remove these in order, section by section. Here's how to create an easy texture using sunbursts. I go back to those lines that I cut, and I'm not removing this piece. I'm holding it with my left hand, skip a line. Cut it out, skip a line. Cut it out, skip a line. cut it out, skip a line. Seems very silly. A lot of kids think, man, why would you go back and spend time creating simple lines like that? But what it does, it puts some pattern in the back of your picture that unexpectedly makes the eye focus on your original design. And my original design was a face, not stripes in the background, but the stripes will help everybody look at my face. Alright, this seems pretty easy, and I'm going pretty quick, but if you want thinner stripes, or if you want to create more detailed patterns like zigzag, when we were spraying in on this picture right now, everything that's gray would be the color that we chose with spray paint. Cut. A little trick I do to label my spray paint cans with a color, because a lot of kids lose their caps and they can't figure out what color it is really quickly. If you write it on here like I did with dark blue, very quickly you can figure out what color it is and trade with your friends. This is a different type of tip than this spray paint can, which is forest green. They have an insertable tip that we won't be using today. These are better for coverage. They cover an area that's much bigger faster, if that makes sense. Cut. Okay, so we were careful when we took our stencil outside to put it inside of a file folder. That helps, especially in book bags like we said, but more or less the more you cut, the easier it is for it to fall apart. So I'm going to open it carefully and place it on top of the surface that I want to spray on. This time we're going to use a piece of paper just to test it and slip the file folder out from under it. I'm also going to show you today real easily how to use color to help you and create a pattern that's kind of textured in the background. The first thing I'm going to do is use this, and I'm going to use it for a reason. I want to give a little bit of color to my background, and I want my face to be a darker color like black today. You notice my three colors are red and blue and black, right? You with me so far? Okay, so I'm placing the stencil down in one corner of the picture, and I will come back. And you're going to keep it at least, if you see how big your hand is, it's a good measure, one hand away from the paper that you're going to spray on. In this case, I'm using that old stencil I showed you of the alphabet, and I go back and forth, tap, tap, tap. Now you can hold it for a long time if you go back and forth fast. If you hover or stay in one place, tap, 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 like tap, tap, tap. I'm going to go back and forth quickly because I like the texture. Notice how fast I'm going, and notice how far away from the paper I am. Now I'm going to stop because there's no need to have a puddle of paint on top of a paper or something that I'm using to stencil. I'm going to move my stencil a little bit now and change the direction of my stencil so that it goes this way.
3D.
And then I'm going to go the same technique. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 strokes is all it takes to make a stencil pattern. Now I'm going to do the same thing again. Now that I've got a good pattern and I know that I can put an image right in the middle of it, I'm using black. Black is always going to be your darkest color, and black is going to give you an easy image for your audience to see. Now I'm kind of being sloppy. Remember, if I wanted to be careful, I could use my file folder to move this. One thing that I tell kids, don't throw this away. Every time that you spray paint it, it gets stronger and stronger. When you first do this, you're going to get confused because you're going to look at what you painted and say, wait a minute, it's all black, I don't want it to come out like this. And so it's a good idea, if you have any doubts, to test it on a plain white sheet of paper first. But remember when you peel it up that it's going to protect the rest of your paper from the stencil, and even if you don't like it, you can take your scissors and go back and fix it.
Wow, that's cool.
Now, mine could be a little bit darker. If you guys were going to give me criticism, I could have a much, much darker face, couldn't I?
Yeah.
And the way I would get a darker face is by taking a little more time to build up the black. But if I wanted to test this, I'm going to ask one of you guys to pass me a sheet of white paper so we can just test it, make sure I like my stencil first. Come on, as long as I let it dry and I don't have a drippy puddle, this should be a pretty good technique. I'm going to search first for places where the paper's sticking up. They call that buckling. Wherever the paper is buckling, push it down. Doesn't have to be perfect. And what I do is move my hand sometimes. Close to where I'm spraying, spray away from your hand.
Does it come off really easily if you...
Does not come off. Good question. This is enamel paint like fingernail polish. Does fingernail polish come off easily?
No.
No.
Use alcohol.
If you've ever taken it off with alcohol, that's what you need to take spray paint off. Same thing. Go home and use fingernail polish, remember, or alcohol. So this is just one line of blue on black, and let's test my theory. Not a terrible stencil. If you see it now, the line's much more bold because there was white left behind it instead of pattern, right?
You should put